Welcome to 3 Lanes, episode 3. This is the birth of the Volkswagen GTI. I thought about starting this episode straight going to the GTI, but the more I thought about it, I thought it would be a disservice just to start with the GTI. So I thought, well, maybe I give an introduction about the Golf, right? Because that's where everything starts. But then I look more into the Golf, and then I think, well, the Golf started to replace the Beetle. So I went further back and decided to start a little bit with the Beatles. So we will start with the Volkswagen Beetle and a little bit of its backstory, not a lot, just a brief introduction, just to have an idea of where Volkswagen stood back then and why the GTI was made. Another parenthesis that I wanted to make is that my love for Volkswagen starts as far back as I don't know, maybe when I was in middle school, elementary school. I used to see my dentist driving down the street. I think he had a friend on the same street that I used to live, and he used to drive by with his Mark IV Tornado Red. He used to, take the speed bumps in diagonal. I don't know if because the speed bumps might have been way too big or because the car was lowered. But man, that car was really, really clean, and it's basically what inspired my love for Volkswagen, a Mark IV. Well, if I do the math, around 97, right? So I was around 12. Yeah, I think middle schoolish kind of thing. That's where my love for Volkswagen actually started. But without further going down my rabbit hole for Volkswagen, let's begin with the Volkswagen Beetle. The Beetle, fun fact, was requested by none other than Hitler. Hitler himself commissioned the Beetle to Ferdinand Porsche, and the idea was to create the people's car, right? An affordable car that was good for the average German citizen. And as a matter of fact, if you Google it, the German word Volkswagen translates to the people's car. Volks meaning people, and wagon means car or wagon, whatever. Uh, but yeah, that was the idea behind the Beetle, right? And the main idea that I want to grab from the Beetle is when it started. So the Beetle started, the concept of the Beetle actually started in 1934, and the prototype started between 1936 to 1938. We all know it's a rear engine car, air cooled, round, right? Those are facts. Production started in 1938, but stopped because of World War II, from 1939 to 1945. So after 1945, post-war, the production of the Beetle started. Remember, 1945. Okay. Now we're gonna leave the Beetle here. We might revisit it later in a future episode, but not today. Now we're gonna fast forward 30 years to the 1960s. Uh, by 1960s, remember the Beetle started in 1938. So by the 60s, it was like a 30-year-old car. Sales were declining. It was no longer competitive. There were modern vehicles from other brands like Fiat, Renault that were making more efficient front engine vehicles, front wheel drive, which is more efficient. And adding to that, another factor that I'm going to touch on in a little bit. But Volkswagen needed to reinvent itself. They needed a different platform. They needed a new, compact, practical, efficient, and always affordable car that could take over the spot of the Beetle, right? And here's where the Volkswagen Golf Mark I enters the picture. Introduced in 1974, it redefined Volkswagen and the car market basically, with a DNA that we still see today in Volkswagen. The front wheel drive, front engine, and basically the utilitarian part of Volkswagen with the hot hatch. But the factor that I wanted to talk about is the oil crisis from 1973, which is called, or people call it, the first oil shock. The first oil shock happened in October 1973, and it was triggered due to tensions between Israel and the Arab states, something called the Yom Kippur War. There's three factors that created the oil crisis. The initial one, the Yom Kippur War between the Arab states and Israel, which we mentioned, then the OPEC embargo, which was an embargo from the Arab states uh, to any country that helped Israel within this war. Some of these countries affected were European countries, the United States, and Canada, I believe. And add to that the cut in production. So the OPEC, which is the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, cut the production of oil, basically to mess with everybody, right? So by the end of 1973, you see a huge rise in petroleum costs, starting with a barrel that cost $3. Now it costs $12, an exponential increase of 400%. Huge impact in the world at that time. The effects that we see from the oil crisis is a huge recession, obviously. The oil increase inflation with everything. Then we see a shift in energy policy, meaning countries are looking for more energy efficient uh, ways to do things, right? Even for automakers at that time. That's why automakers are switching from something like the Volkswagen Beetle, which is a rear engine, rear wheel drive, to something more efficient, which is a front wheel drive, front engine vehicle. Something that a lot of other brands had already done, except Volkswagen. There's a geopolitical shift also here, where the OPEC becomes a more influential, or they realize they're more influential than what they thought, and the relations between the Western countries and the Middle East become more complex ever since then. And oil has become a huge factor, or tension creating factor, ever since then for the Western countries. But let's reel it back to the Gulf now. Uh, One thing that really helped Volkswagen in the creation of the Golf was the acquisition of Auto Union. Auto Union was a joint. I'm not sure if it's a joint venture, but it's basically a group that had four brands within it. One of them being Audi. Auto Union was known for its pre-war racing legacy. But as of late during those years, it was struggling financially, something that made it easier for Volkswagen to acquire them in 1964. The acquisition added to Volkswagen huge expertise in front wheel drive, water cooling, and four-stroke engines. Huge thing that helped them out into the development of the Golf. The fun fact here, that Audi's four rings in the logo today symbolize the union of these four brands: Horch, DKW, Wonder, and Audi. The first one, honestly, forgive my pronunciation, but we'll leave it at that. So, with the acquisition of Auto Union, it became easier for Volkswagen to create the Golf. So now we have the tools to create this new vehicle that Volkswagen desperately needed back then. But now I think we can focus on the looks, the design, and the design of the Mark One Golf was entrusted to some dude named Giugiaro, some Italian guy, right? Nobody knows who he is. Actually, Giugiaro delivered a design simple, clean, and modern. Right, the Mark One GTI. I mean Golf. Sorry, we're not in the GTI yet. It's a very clean design. Boxy but aerodynamic, sharp edges, wide stands, pretty compact at 3.7 meters. What would that be, like 7-8 feet long? I don't know. Uh, Hatchback, very versatile. But who's Giugiaro, right? Who is this guy? I mean, if you're a car enthusiast, watch enthusiast, you might know these things. But if you don't know, Giugiaro is one of the biggest. Uh, I was gonna call it car designer, but actually, I believe he's one of the biggest designers out there ever. Right? He designed for Volkswagen, for Ferrari, Maserati. He designed the DeLorean in 1981. He designed the Lotus Spirit in 1976, the Fiat Panda in 1980, the Nikon F3 in 1980 also, actually, and the Seiko Ripley. Remember the weird looking watch from the movie Aliens? If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to Google it or either go watch the movie. I would recommend go watch the movie instead. But the Seiko Ripley is if you're a watch guy, that's one of the darlings for everybody, right? The Seiko Ripley, at least for me, I think those are really really cool. But Giugiaro's design was basically described as folded paper. So the design of the Golf was introduced in 1971 by Giugiaro. That same year, the the Golf started mass production. They started the production with a front-wheel drive concept, a transverse engine ranging from 1.1 to 1.5 liters, water cooled, and McPherson suspension. Sorry for the double wishbone lovers out there, but this one had McPherson struts. Launched officially in 1974, the Mark One Golf, made in Wolfsburg. But later on, it would add facilities in South Africa and actually in Pennsylvania, here in the U.S. Where that facility was added later to the production of the Golf. The actual Golf, or Rabbit as it was called here in the US, made its debut in the US in 1975. And from 1974 to 1976, 2 years after the launch of the Golf, Volkswagen celebrated 1 million units in sale. That's insane. 2 years. Back then, imagine the 70s, 1 million units sold. Man, I don't know why we can just find any more good units, unmolested, as they say, units anymore. That would be so cool to get a Golf. Uh, well, Volkswagen ended up selling 6.8 million units by 1983. That was the last year of production for the Golf. But you know how automakers are, and the Golf was not enough. The Golf was definitely not enough, and Volkswagen wanted to go for more. And there's actually an inside group in Volkswagen itself that started tinkering after hours. That's actually the story that people tell all the time in the internet, but I don't know. Uh, they say that this uh, clandestine uh, group of engineers started tinkering after hours and created the GTI, but I have a different take on this. Which I'm gonna touch on later. Uh, but the if you Google who created the GTI, a lot of times what you get is the name's Anton Conrad, who's the head of PR back then, and Hermann Habitzel, the development chief in Volkswagen, who approved the project. Those are mostly there all the time. Every time you Google who created the GTI, it's there. Oh, by the way, do you know what GTI stands for? GTI stands for Gran Turismo Injection. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to the story. But unfortunately, the individual contributors, they tend to be forgotten most of the time, and I honestly have not found a consistent list of engineers that work on the GTI. You get a name here, name there, but nothing is ever consistent. If you have any information that you might want to share, that would be great. That would be really really cool. But it's kind of like when you think about Tesla, right? It's when you think about Tesla, you think Elon Musk. You don't think about designers or engineers behind closed doors. Those tend to be forgotten. But I mean, if you're deep into the weeds of the car industry, then you might know the designer and all that stuff. But it's not very common knowledge, I would say. Well, my take here is that the PR had the pulse on the market, and they pushed for this version of the Golf, right? The GTI. I'm pretty sure they were probably looking outside and they were looking at, hey man, these people want a sports car. We should try to develop something with the Golf and see if it's a hit. And it was. I That's my take on that story. I don't know if I'm completely if I'm right, but from what I've seen in the industries and all that stuff, that's what I think it happened. But I digress. Let's move on to the key features of the Mark 1 GTI compared to the Mark 1 Golf. The GTI had a 1.6 liter inline engine instead of the 1.1 to 1.5 liter uh, offered in the Golf. It had broader wheels, sport tune suspension, black wheel arch extensions to allow using the broader wheels. Red edge around the grille, which we still see to the current generation. Plaid seats, those classic plaid seats that again we can still see in the current iterations, if I'm not mistaken. The golf ball that still prevails, and sports steering wheel. Those were the key features that differentiated the GTI between the Golf. Fun fact: the engine was taken from the Audi 80 GT. This is a practice that we still see today. If you're not aware, the TFSI engine from early 2010 Audis were used between Audi and Volkswagen, and now the TSI engines are being used between Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche SUVs like the Macan. The Macan has the same engine as the Golf R, the GTI, the Audi RS3, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, Differently tuned, but the same base of the engine. Some components might be missing from the Porsche engines, like the dipstick, right? A few friends have commented that on me, to me, that the Porsche engines do not bring a dipstick, which I think it's interesting. Again, I'm digressing, but the GTI made its debut in 1976 and ran until 1983, just like the Golf. The price back then was 13,850 uh, German marks. And if we take into account the exchange rate in 1976 between the dollar and the marks, the price in dollars would have been 5,540 US dollars. Again, 5,500 US dollars. Inflation adjusted to today, that price would have been 29,300 USD. And if you Google Volkswagen GTI, the suggested MSRP or starting MSRP today is $31,965. Not a huge difference between prices from then and today. $2,000 around, give or take. Crazy that the price basically remains the same. I mean, I guess you could still call it an affordable vehicle. I know times like today, it's hard to conceive paying that much for a car, but that's math. Math doesn't lie, I guess. Um, the GTI at its peak, the Mark 1 GTI, sorry, reached 460,000 units sold. when it was discontinued. Crazy, crazy to think about a car like this. You know, now it's considered an icon. It's a staple in the Volkswagen lineup, I believe. Uh, in present days, we see somehow history repeating with Volkswagen, and it's interesting because they've been kind of late to adapt to electrification, and they had the e-Golf. I don't know if it just didn't sell here in the US, but they discontinued that. But now we have them collaborate with Rivian, right? They have a deal with Rivian, and it seems like they're gonna adopt some of the Rivian technology into their own cars, which I think it's cool. Hopefully they're taking a note from their own playbook and they're going back to being competitive. I see a lot of complaints about the ID4, the infotainment systems in the current lineups not being great. I don't know if the range is good. I haven't heard much about it, but you know, uh, a piece of my heart is with Volkswagen, right? Volkswagen has been, as a fanboy, I guess, uh, one of the cool cars that you see as a car enthusiast. Just like BMWs or Alfa Romeos, right? But I hope Volkswagen sticks around for a while. Hopefully this whole electrification doesn't kill them. And with that, I will leave you. This has been 3 Lanes episode 3. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your time. If you have any feedback, please leave it in the comments or in any social media we have a presence. Thanks again. See you next time.